Howdy, it's Jim Morado, and this is a video I made actually back in September 2014 in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. This is the Mothman Festival, the annual Mothman Festival, and right now we're in the Mothman Museum. This is a lot of fun. I've not gone to the Mothman Festival every year, but I've been to a lot of them, and I know I've been to at least one or two that were not very well attended. The weather was bad, and they had a very small crowd. You could used to drive up and kind of park downtown, and you're good to go for the festival. That's not the case now, and it's just really progressively built up into a pretty crazy big packed event. Yeah, but it's a lot of fun. You know, I know I like to read the occasional ghost story type book or cryptozoology type book, and they'll have some authors there selling and signing their books. There's the Mothman right there, along with some other characters. Not sure what the other characters are about, but I know the Mothman for sure. And we're right in downtown. There's the historic Low Hotel, which is very cool, very old, very historic. I've talked to the people that run that place. Very sweet couple. We're actually getting ready to take a bus ride down to the igloos and kind of around town a little bit.
Your blood type and next you can, in case you don't make it back. Mothman's been seen out in the here. Okay? Be careful.
She'll go voluntarily.
Yeah, and there's one of the famous men in black giving us a warning before we do our bus tour. Yeah, I mean, you can tell it's a nice happening festival right here. The crowd hasn't hit yet. I think this might have been in the morning, Saturday morning, before everything kind of gets heated up. But yeah, a lot going on with the Mothman Festival, and a lot going on with Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which has become just one of my favorite little towns on its own. It's just a cool little, especially downtown area. And at the Mothman Festival, I've done this particular tour a couple of times. They usually sell bus tickets. I think it's maybe $20 or something like that, and they kind of drive you around and give you a really cool tour for the area and about the Mothman. And that's Ashley. She's the daughter of Jeff Wamsley, who really started this whole thing, and he owns and operates the Mothman Museum. Just a cool guy. I like him a lot. I've emailed him several times about odd things relating to the Mothman, and he's always gotten back to me. Just a nice guy, and he's written a couple books on the Mothman himself. As we drive through here, there's the little kind of courthouse post office right in the center of town, and of course, vendors for the Mothman Festival. You know, I love post offices, and that's a cool post office there. They have good people always working there that like to talk about history, and they know about the town and can give you some advice. There is a line. Yeah, Turtleman was here this particular year. That is a line to meet Turtleman. And yes, I did meet Turtleman. He's a very nice fellow. He actually, man, I can't remember the year. I remember seeing him before he was famous. He was here at the Mothman Festival. I mean, I think he was doing kind of like a little sideshow thing. I think for $2 or $3, you know, you could see this, you know, this guy go and do his show with some animals, and you know, not a lot of people cared, but I believe he was discovered by a camera crew that was there. So he was sort of discovered at the Mothman Festival, and of course he lives here in Kentucky and does his show. I've heard from many people that he's a nice guy. He was nice when I said howdy to him, and yeah, glad to see him making a name for himself and all. I would, just for what it's worth, Ashley's doing some great narration at the front of the bus, but the wind was havoc with my microphones this day. So I'll probably just talk a little bit about the Mothman as we go through town. I did put up another video about Point Pleasant, West Virginia, just kind of talking about the town itself. And this is downtown, and we just went by the park. And at that little state park, there's a monument there, and that's where the Battle of Point Pleasant, 1774, occurred. And it's just a nice little park. There's a river museum right there by it too, and they talk a whole lot about the river and how the river's affected the area, and they talk about the bridge, the famous bridge collapse that is often linked to Mothman. They talk about that a lot at the museum, and they come at it from a very matter-of-fact angle. I think with any town where you get a lot of folklore and legends, there are some people that enjoy that sort of thing, and then there are some people that don't want to talk about that at all. At that little river museum, I've been there. It's just a great museum that does not mention Mothman at all. Yeah, so but I mean, there's a whole lot to learn. It is a great museum, but it's just overshadowed by the Mothman statue in town and the Mothman Museum and everything Mothman. Yeah, and the whole town really has built an economy around Mothman, which I think is pretty cool. Of course, you know, there was a bridge that collapsed in town, and yeah, I mean, a lot of people died, and it was quite a tragedy. I always think it's good to treat that for what it is. But yeah, in 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed, and 46 people died, and that's a lot of people, and it was a big deal. I believe two of the bodies were never recovered. Of course, it was huge news, and it was a bridge going over to Ohio from Point Pleasant. They still have, there's a marker. If you walk down along the river, there is a marker showing where the bridge was, and there's a couple of monuments in town just talking about that. Oh, and yeah, just a ton of history here that's amazing and often overshadowed by the Mothman. George Washington was here in 1770, and I believe the town got its name because he described it as a pleasant point, and of course he went on to bigger things. But yeah, and other weird events have happened here, but most importantly, you have the Mothman. And the Mothman is just one of the more creepy, it's usually considered a cryptid, kind of like a Bigfoot or a Loch Ness monster, kind of an unknown physical creature. Some people think it's some sort of demonic entity, but according to books, there were over 100 people that witnessed the Mothman here in the very late 60s, right before the Silver Bridge collapsed. In fact, for a little over a year before the Silver Bridge collapse, people reported seeing the Mothman. And usually at the Mothman Festival, they'll have one or two of those witnesses. Throughout the weekend, they'll have guest speakers at the theater in town, and they will talk about, you know, their book, whatever they're working on, things like that, and they will almost always have a couple of witnesses who will tell their story. And I remember, it might have been this year, I remember at one of the Mothman festivals, I ended up talking to Faye DeWitt. Geez, probably for about half an hour, 45 minutes, and she was one of the witnesses, and she seemed very sincere and credible. And that's the kind of thing about a Mothman. You know, you get some pleasant down home kind of people that are telling their story, and they're very believable, and they seem to have nothing to gain by telling their story. You know, they've not sold books, they haven't really done anything to make a buck. So, and there are some crazy Mothman stories. You know, people being chased and saying that the Mothman was moving at about 100 miles an hour. And just the movements and the descriptions are very eerie. Also, the main legend of the Mothman really comes from John Keel's 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies. And I remember the first time I read The Mothman Prophecies. It is just one good creepy book. Man, it just it's occurring in the 60s. John Keel, who's a UFO researcher, is coming down to Point Pleasant, basically to research, weird occurrences, mostly UFO related in the area. And he's telling his story about coming to this area and just all sorts of weird things happening. Not even specifically UFO or supernatural, but just bizarre stuff with phone calls, TVs acting weird, just lots of bizarre stuff. And there's all sorts of things you can write those kind of things up as. But it's still a very bizarre story, and it's going on at a bizarre time in a very, very rural area. If you knew time before the internet and cell phones, and if you know what it's like to walk across, a wooded area or a cornfield late at night without a cell phone, before, our modern times, it was a much more eerie feeling. It was very creepy. And to come out to, say a little area like Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the 60s, I could definitely understand how, especially a stranger, might feel, creepy. And that's not a knock against Point Pleasant. But I do want to say, when it comes to Point Pleasant, there are a few towns that I've been to, and especially towns associated with legends. There's Flatwoods, West Virginia. There's Adams, Tennessee, that come to mind right off the bat. Salem, Massachusetts is one that there's just certain odd things associated with places, and there's certain towns you walk into, and just about the moment you walk in, you're almost like, yeah, I get it. I understand how people get a weird vibe or a supernatural kind of vibe. Two towns to me that rings true for immensely are Adams, Tennessee, home of the Bell Witch legend, and definitely Point Pleasant, West Virginia. When you walk around the old downtown area and stuff, you can just kind of feel... You can kind of understand where those legends come from, for sure. Yeah, in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, it's got the folklore, and it's I think it's a charming little town. There's several nice little shops downtown that I like, and again, I've mentioned them in other videos. I've mentioned them before. And there's the Coffee Grinder, which is just one of my favorite coffee shops around. It's cozy. It's a little family-ran place, and they sell Mothman cookies, which are kind of legendary these days. But they have good coffee. And it's a good, clean, friendly place to stop at when you're in town. Probably one or two times a year I'll have a friend who doesn't, or maybe they just found out about the Mothman, and they know that I know about Point Pleasant, and they'll ask me to go down with them. So I'm in this town at least a couple days every year. I like to go here. It's a nice day trip from where I live, if you get up nice and early. Anyway, I'll take friends here. We'll get up, try to get a good early start, and I always try to take them to the Coffee Grinder first, and just sit there for an hour or so. It's that kind of coffee shop. It's fun just to hang out there for a bit. And if you're coming from Charleston, West Virginia, that area, as you go up towards Point Pleasant, it's a nice rural, very scenic area. There's a train track along the way. You're going right beside the river, and you pass the legendary hillbilly hot dogs on the way. So as you go back towards Charleston, make sure I'm sorry, not Charleston, Huntington. As you go back towards Huntington, make sure you stop at Hillbilly Hot Dogs. And it looks scary on the outside, but they've got good food. And everybody knows Hillbilly Hot Dogs at this point, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, anyway, let me talk a little bit about the festival. The Mothman Festival is just a lot of fun. Like I said, we're taking a bus tour. We're going out to the igloos. The famous igloos, they were built right before during World War II to basically store ammunition. And as you will see, you get out there, and there's igloos, and they're in the ground. You have hilly areas, and you almost wouldn't know they were there if somebody didn't point them out to you. But it's in this area they built a bunch of these igloos, and during the war they stored ammunition, and they were sort of trying to hide them in this very rural, hidden area, and hide them in these igloos. If you're if you're flying an airplane overhead and you look down, you're just going to see green. You're not going to realize that ammunition is stored there. So these igloos still exist on basically like a nature preserve. I've actually been out there before when I didn't realize it was hunting season and seen hunters out there. Of course, we left the area immediately. But yeah, you need to be careful out there for a lot of reasons. It's secluded, and I'm sure there's some wild critters out there that you might want to be careful about. And people hunt there. It's open to the public. But yeah, it is open to the public, so you can go out there and see these igloos. And I don't think anybody's really using many of them at this point. I think they're mostly all open to the public, where you can, they're just there, I guess, unless they're locked up. And I know several years ago, one of them still had some ammunition in it, and it blew up. It exploded. No one was hurt, but I think they kind of locked the area down for a while and tried to recheck everything and make sure everything was okay. But the TNT area, there were sightings, and that was, I think a lot of people believed that the Mothman might be hanging out in the TNT area. So, yeah, and then not several years ago, it's been a while now. Yeah, it was 2002, I just double-checked. The movie The Mothman Prophecies came out. And that really, man, that exploded the legend of the Mothman. It was a very kind of little-known legend, I think, more than anything. And after the movie came out, everybody knew about the Mothman. I'm not a fan of the movie myself. I know some other people think it's great. I probably need to go back and rewatch it again. I know my opinions of things change a lot as I get older, and maybe I need to go watch that movie again with a different way of thinking about it. But yeah, I remember seeing the commercials, though. The commercials to me were a lot more scary than the movie came off. That's just me, though. Also, lots of, you had some military stuff going on out here, and I think there are some kind of conspiracy theories relating to, chemicals getting in the water and toxic nuclear type issues going on. You can look it up, but there's a lot of that. There's also the curse of, there's the curse of Chief Cornstalk. And that's something else to look up too. There are so many rabbit holes you can go down when it comes to Point Pleasant and the Mothman. A lot of people just think of the Mothman as a bit of a harbinger of doom. People had all these sightings in the area, and then kind of at the end of that year, the bridge collapses, and there were reports. I don't know how reliable they are, but I know I've read somewhere that people said they saw him when the bridge collapsed. And then, I know that there are other stories, folklore-type stories tying him to other tragic events that have happened. I know there for a while, a couple of years back, there were sightings around Chicago. And I know that kind of had some people excited too. It was, kind of Mothman coming back sort of stuff. But yeah, so John Keel puts out his book, The Mothman Prophecies, in 1975. John Keel lived, I believe, up until 2008, and I believe he attended one of the Mothman festivals. Unfortunately, I did not get to go that year. But yeah, he at least came to one of them, and I'd heard, especially later in life, he was a bit paranoid and worried about people And as you read the Mothman prophecies, there's a whole lot of he believes other people are contacting him that are impersonating other people. He definitely was concerned about people's motives and what people were up to. Anyway, you should read the Mothman prophecies because it's just a good weird book. It's great reading right before Halloween. It's great reading right before a trip to Point Pleasant. I've actually bought copies of the Mothman prophecies to give to friends so they can read the book before they go to Point Pleasant, and I have a well-worn copy myself. And like I said, even if you're a skeptic, it's just a good creepy book. And John Keel was really thinking, I don't want to use the tired old cliche of thinking outside the box, but he was definitely thinking in a whole nother way. And some of his thoughts, especially in folklore communities, cryptids, ghosts, UFOs, a lot of his kind of concepts that he talked about, in this book from 1975, and before that in other books, a lot of people are kind of looking at those again as ways to explain unexplainable phenomenon. Another book that I read, and I actually just read this one recently, it's Mothman Evil Incarnate, the Unauthorized Companion to the Mothman Prophecies by Loren Coleman. I've met Loren Coleman. He's a nice fella. He's really known for his Bigfoot research and his kind of still being a thoughtful investigator, but still kind of chasing after cryptids. In my books, he still has some credibility. He's still trying to do stuff somewhat scientifically, but he's still chasing after unknown creatures. He runs I think it's the International Cryptid Museum. Used to be in Portland, Maine. I think it's in St. Augustine, Florida now. I've never been to it. I've never been in those cities at the time that his museums have been there. But so he wrote this book, Mothman Evil Incarnate. I know he did some promotion work for the Mothman Prophecies movie when it came out, and John Keel actually mentions him in the Mothman Prophecies at one point, which that kind of gives you some cred right away. But yeah, so he puts out this book, Mothman Evil Incarnate, and it's just kind of a nice addition to have. He kind of gets into just some other side notes about the Mothman prophecies. We've got to the igloos, and Ashley is actually going to get into some interesting stuff here. I'll shut up for a bit.
So my theory is, with all the stuff that's going on in the TNT area, with all the pagan stuff and all of that, and you take the history of Greek mythology, with the stuff that they write about in the Bible, and Linda talking about them disappearing and being scared of that crucifix, if they were government agents, how did they disappear in front of their eyes? And number two, why are they scared of a cross? I don't know. It's just a theory, but it's creepy to think about. I had a run-in with a strange guy a few years ago, and he came into the museum, and he was acting really funny. And usually the men in black were always reported as having like Asian-like eyes and pale skin. And I remember Mary Harrier always saying that they never blinked, so they were just weird acting. And anyways, this guy comes into the museum, and it's right before the festival, so I'm usually in there helping out anyways. And he asks us, dead serious, asks us, do you have any complimentary tobacco or licorice? And I'm like, are you serious? And he was serious. And then he kept saying, is this stuff documented? Is this stuff documented? Just acting weird about stuff. And we're like, what are you talking about? He's like, this stuff that happened with this Mothman thing, is it documented? There should be documentation somewhere about this. And we're like, well, we have press clippings and stuff. I remember he's wearing these really weird, funky shoes. And just acting like he's not from this area, at least, or this time. And we talked to a guy that was one of the speakers at the festival a few years ago at the same time. Alvin Calvin is telling him about it. He said back in the 50s and 60s, they always had complimentary tobacco and licorice at restaurants and businesses.
Really?
Yeah. So that was kind of creepy. So that was only been my weird interaction with anybody like that. But a couple things you'll notice when we get out. The igloos are very, the temperature difference drops drastically because it's so thick-walled and there's no light in there. So we'll have flashlight. Another thing you'll notice is these things are infamous for draining people's batteries. on the camera and watch that battery and see. Paranormal State, you guys know that show? It's on Annie. They came in here and did a tour. They used this bus and they brought their cameras and it would just zap those batteries. And sometimes I'll see it, we'll walk in. You can watch your cell service too. You'll see it and it'll drop when you're in there and it'll come right back up when you walk out. Same thing with batteries on cell phones. I'll have people come in and they'll be talking or whatever and then it's gone. And sometimes they come back on and sometimes they don't. So just to give you a heads up about that too. So we'll go down here, we'll check the first 2 out. We'll spend about 5 minutes in each one and we'll come back on and we'll make our way back to town.
That author, is he still alive?
John Keel, no, he passed away a couple years ago. Yeah. You can get his book though. They have the Mothman Prophecies book, the one the movie was based off of. That's what he wrote about. Yeah.
I can see Brent not going.
The leak crap fella.
Oh yeah, no
That's
face.
based off, both of them are based off of him. Yeah. The leak is still backwards, so they put that together.
Oh, thank you.
Have to tell him about that battery.
Yeah, it's totally full right now.
Okay, we'll see what happens. We'll be back.
Phone.
Alright. We'll make our way. You can walk around.
Yeah, so that Ashley was telling her kind of thoughts and theories about the Mothman and what it might be, and kind of goes in a spiritual direction with the Mothman. And she, of course, has a lot of connection to this town, to the area, and to the legend. Anytime you read a book on the Mothman or the bridge collapse, her dad is Jeff Walmsley, and that last name appears several times when talking about that legend. And yeah, it's exciting listening to her tell her stories, and her dad, like I said, is also just a really interesting guy to talk to about the legend, about the area. And it's quite a treat that have her kind of giving us this tour on this particular day. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit here and there because the wind is messing with the microphone some. But if it looks like the audio's okay, I might try to turn it down to get some more of what she's saying. And she's given a heck of a tour. In fact, if you go to the Mothman Festival, make sure you buy the bus ticket to go out and do this. It's definitely worth it. And it's pretty much, if you're coming to Point Pleasant, you go to the Mothman Museum, walk up and down the street a bit. If you do this bus tour, you've covered the area. And there's one of the igloos right there.
You won't even be able to see it. It just looks like a forest reserve, which is cool. So, and once you get in here, your eyes will start to adjust. It's a little dark at first, and then you'll be able to see everything.
When you look at the other igloos, the one that are leased and you can't get to and whatnot, are they as kind of remote looking as this right here?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, you probably surrounded by them. If you look, sometimes, and when we walk up to the second one, sometimes you see like that down there, there's dome shaped to the trees across the little lake. That's probably another one. There's 100 of them out here. You're completely surrounded by them. So, all right, we'll go ahead in.
I'm just surprised if people don't try to come up here and check them out.
Okay. When this footage is found, they're going to be like, oh, they did go into the igloos. Oh, what was that?
See that?
Just like the cans that they have in the museum.
Yeah, those used to hold water out.
So what?
It's playing. Someone doesn't like Derek.
Derek's a jerk. Yeah. What? Yeah, we're obviously leaving the igloos, and those igloos are, I mean, to me that video is a very accurate way of seeing how those igloos are. And it's almost impossible to hear the person talking next to you. It's very echoey, and it's disorientating. You know, it's just it's dark, it's round. You know, silence almost echoes there, and it's just it's a very eerie place to be. But it's also very exciting, and it is strange. But that definitely is a good representation of those igloos. And as Ashley said, those you know, you've seen this area, you've seen stuff about this on some of the ghost shows and some of that, and it's just very, very, very strange, and it adds to the whole a strangeness of Point Pleasant. Obviously, if you go out to Point Pleasant, the igloos are, you know, that's kind of the famous, that's a must-see spot. And it's, you know, just a short drive from downtown. I know before I did this trip, I asked them at the Mothman Museum, like, how do I get there? And they gave me directions. Just about anybody can give you directions to the igloos. I think the Mothman Museum's just a few bucks to go through. I don't think they charge more than, yeah, maybe $4 to go there. It was $20 to do this bus tour. You know, the Mothman Festival is free. They don't charge admission. They aren't gouging people. You know, they're obviously just people who appreciate what they have here, and they're doing this. Yeah, just doing this because they're good people who care about the story. Obviously, if you go to the Mothman Museum, they do have a heck of a gift shop, and you're going to want to drop some coin there. That's true love right there.
I see that. You know, it says Taylor, so.
I know. I saw that. They're still good at the moment. I've been checking.
I haven't had the experiences yet so far. Last year, I had a
I was here last year because it was, we had paper towels and rub the windows.
Oh, you don't remember last year? Yes.
It was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Alright, so we're going to make our way back to the bus.
You know how you can tell how thick this is? Do you see anything wrong through it or not?
What do you mean?
You can tell how
You got little cracks, but you don't have, it's at least that thick, I'd say.
that shit's gotta be.
Last year we didn't come to this one. We just went to the first one. $20 for the plane ride. Do we care about that? I know. Like $30, I'd be like, nah. But $20, I'm kind of like, what? $20? Yeah.
What's the weight limit is?
Yeah.
You're kind of chunky, man.
I know, dude. I know. When we did the zip lining in Louisville, they actually weighed us.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and I think it's 275 is the cutoff.
Really?
Yeah,
What was the cutoff?
275. Yeah.
I see you guys trying to hold around.
Hey, we're pretty open about stuff. It's okay. Hey,
Better than what?
that Q&A.
Yeah. Down to what?
That Q&A, the 1 o'clock Q&A.
The what?
Like the presentation.
The what? What would you do?
I wonder if he's going to enjoy walking back to Lexington. Oh, wait, I'm not driving. I can't make those threats today.
No.
What are you looking at? Huh?
Mothman. Look.
Ah.
There's a spore.
I know. You're kind of referencing Night of the Living Dead there, aren't you?
Yeah, I did actually.
I've been in that cemetery.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Where is it? Philadelphia?
No,
Pennsylvania?
close to Pittsburgh.
That's what's it.
Yeah.
It's down here, so let's see.
Evans City, Pennsylvania.
Evans Living Dead Cemetery.
There's a big building you see in the background. I have a brick from that building up there where you're sleeping. Thank you.
No problem.
Basically, where the people were, the things started chasing them, that wasn't right here.
No, not on this side. We'll be right over there where it was. We'll go on the other side. The TNT area is really large. I think it's around 3,000 square acres. It's a big facility. And again, we call it TNT area. It's actually called the Aquatic Wildlife Refuge.
Yeah, and I kind of reminded myself of a couple of things there. I was actually at the Mothman Festival in 2013 also, and I did the little bus tour, and it rained. It was a very rainy, bad weather day that day, and it was just a very, very low turnout festival. But it also kind of made for a good one if you made it to it, because that kind of rainy, gloomy feel really fits in with all the Mothman legend and all. Also, the year before, I think because of just weather issues and it was so gloomy and muddy out in this area, we just went to the first igloo. We didn't go to that second igloo. And then I of course, I edited out a little bit of walking on the way back, just because we kind of saw that on the way going up.
That is where the fight between the colonial soldiers and Cornstalk and all his guys happened, and it was 46 people died. And it's exactly the same spot where that sub bridge stood. 46 people died on it. I thought that was odd. And actually, the 13th, believe it or not, it's very ironic too. The 13th eye bar is what caused the bridge to collapse. Exactly 13.
Yeah, and that wind is gonna wreak havoc on my microphones right around this point. Yeah, so yeah, Ashley's talking there again about she brings up the number 13, which occurs a lot in the whole Mothman mythology. Well, I wanted to mention too, I was talking about John Keel and Lauren Coleman a moment ago. Probably the two most connected people to the Mothman legend as far as authors go. And I've always thought of them as coming from two very different perspectives. Lauren Coleman is a bit more scientific. I know his theories on Bigfoot are very, he thinks Bigfoot is a flesh and blood animal that'll be found at some point. At least the last time I heard him do a Q&A, that's what he thought. And John Keel, especially when it comes to Mothman, was much more of a kind of a UFO, supernaturally ghosty kind of thing. But yeah, they knew each other and were both really into Mothman, but I think they kind of came at Mothman from different angles. Lauren Coleman is still around, as I mentioned. He's got an interesting website too. I can't think of the name. I think it's called The Copycat Effect, and it's about Twilight language. He looks for weird coincidences, especially relating to crimes and strange events. Yeah, very, very kind of interesting path he gets on sometimes when he's, especially looking into, a recent shooting or something. But he has a website that kind of gets into that stuff, and it's a little bit out there, but it's fascinating. And if you're into Fortean kind of stuff and strange coincidences, it's a really interesting website. Again, I wanted to mention though the Mothman Museum and the Walmsley family. Jeff has the Mothman Museum in town. It's right beside the Mothman statue. I believe his family also runs another kind of local shop in town, which is where the Mothman Museum used to be. And it's a cool little shop. But if you come to town, this is just a nice little town. The shop owners appreciate your business. There's some other cool independent businesses in town. There's a little antique mall that I like quite a bit. There's a Christian bookstore, and I know we found some stuff for my mother-in-law in there a few times. Of course, when you go to the Mothman Museum, anything you want Mothman, they've got it. Stickers, buttons, shirts, books. Yeah. So when you go to Point Pleasant, stop there and check that out. Let me recommend, too, the Mothman Festival is definitely something to go to. It's, and especially if you live quite a ways from here, it might be a once-in-a-lifetime event. But, man, in my opinion, you've got to go to Point Pleasant at some point for the Mothman Festival, and at some point you should go there, man, on an off day. Go when there's nothing going on, because it's a really interesting city both ways. Oh, and something else to think about if you're doing a West Virginia road trip and you're in this area. I want to say maybe another hour and a half drive towards the east. There's Flatwoods, West Virginia, and they had the whole Flatwoods monster incident that occurred a good 10 years before the whole Mothman thing happened. So this is, if you're doing the whole legend tripping thing or going out, just kind of doing a road trip, you can hit a couple of them here within a short distance of each other. The Flatwoods, they do have a nice little, I think it's the Town Visitor Center / Flatwoods Monster Museum. I put up a video of that. A friend and I went there a few years back, and I do have a video up on YouTube of us going to that museum and driving around town. That legend is not quite as layered as the Mothman legend. I think they've tried to have a Flatwoods Monster Festival, but I don't think it's consistent. I doubt they would even come close to getting the Mothman crowds. But they should try to, because that's a very cool legend too, and it's mostly considered to be a UFO. I think most people consider it some sort of an alien encounter. Really interesting story. All of the witnesses had a very consistent description of the creature they saw. So yeah, that's another interesting story. That yeah. So I mean, you've got the Flatwoods Monster and the Mothman kind of right here by each other. I can't think of any other town that does anything like the Mothman Festival. Do you know of anything? I know in western Kentucky, back in my old neck of the woods, there's the Kelly, down around Hopkinsville, they have the Kelly Little Green Men Festival. A family claimed to see some little green men. I believe this was in 52, 54, and they had a fight at their house with some... Actually, I don't think they were little green men. I think they were silver, but the story has kind of changed, and newspapers kind of altered the story around. But they thought they were little short alien people, and they had a fight with them. And they do, I know that they have I think it's called the Kelly Little Green Men Festival. And my dad and I went to that one year. It was really nice. There's a daughter of one of the original witnesses who has written a book, and she does speaking events about that whole encounter. And she's a very sweet lady. She's very nice. And, and of course she wasn't there, but it's a very believable story too, from the witnesses, and it's well documented. But it was more of just a carnival kind of atmosphere. But they have a similar festival. And I believe through here we're kind of going where one of the early Mothman sightings occurred. And back when I filmed this, I just figured I would film it for myself and one of my buddies, and not do anything with it. So I was just kind of filming again for my own benefit. I had no plans to ever put this on YouTube, so I wasn't too concerned about the audio. Probably would have tried to have sat closer to the front, but just for what it's worth, Ashley there is giving some great stories. I did include a little bit of what she was saying when the wind wasn't so crazy, and yeah, I mean, this is just a fascinating town, a fascinating story, fascinating witnesses, and other fascinating stories in the town. If you're in Point Pleasant, if you're in West Virginia, if you make this trip, which you should, I mean, if you're watching this, you probably have made the trip, or you're thinking about it, make sure you stop by the Mothman Museum and talk to the Walmsley family. I know the last several times I've actually gone to the museum, they've not been around, but the people that they have running the place usually have a pretty good knowledge of what's up. But yeah, Ashley specifically, she's several generations into the story, and has grown up around all of it. She's actually talking a little bit about, she was on one of the shows, I can't remember which one it was. There was, one of the kind of paranormal investigation shows that comes out and investigates. And she was talking about how they kind of flubbed up some of their facts. I think they had an agenda just to make the people of that area look not too intelligent. They kind of re-edited some stuff and all that, but she was talking a little bit about that. Of course, she mentioned that there was another one of the paranormal investigation shows that she was talking about that came out, and they gave them a tour of the igloos and stuff. I think just about every ghost type show or paranormal type show has been out to this area at some point or another. There was one other town that had hit me as I was talking that also has kind of a similar festival. I think they're still doing it. Folk, Arkansas, home of the Boggy Creek Monster, a Bigfoot type critter. I know for maybe a year or two at least, I know that they tried to do a festival. I don't know if they're still doing it or not. I stopped through Folk, Arkansas several years ago on one of our kind of trips, just kind of rambling around the South. They had the Monster Mart, which was kind of a convenience store, but they also had like a whole back section where they sold just Boggy Creek monster stuff, and it was definitely a little town worth stopping at, just to say you'd been there. And I know Lyle Blackburn wrote a great book about that not too long ago. I guess it's maybe been 5 or 6 years ago now, maybe a little more. But he really went out, questioned people, talked to people, tried to document every known sighting that there was, and every documentary. And he's written a few other good books on cryptids, if you're into cryptids. So that's, yeah, look up the name Lyle Blackburn. And he's been at the Mothman Festival several years. Just a really interesting guy. I mentioned before, as we were at the igloos, this particular year at the Mothman Festival, they were having airplane rides at the I guess there's a Point Pleasant airport. And for $20, oh, by the way, there's where the coffee grinder used to be. It's moved if you're in Point Pleasant, where we just drove past the old location. And it is now in a, it's in a location that used to have kind of a, it was a little shop that used to sell Mothman stuff, almost competing with the Mothman Museum, but they had more folk art kind of stuff. You know, little statues of the Mothman that were kind of hand cast and that sort of thing. It was a neat shop. I kind of miss it, but I do like the coffee grinder. And we're coming back into Point Pleasant, and you can kind of see their kind of downtown Main Street and a little bit of the Mothman Festival still going on. Yeah, so check that out. But yeah, for $20 at the airport, they were doing like, I guess, flyovers of the town. Yeah, for $20. And I if we would have had more time, we probably would have done that. I joked with my buddy. $30, no way. $20, that's not a bad price. If you've ever ridden an airplane for any reason, $20 is not a bad price for a plane ride. Yeah, they were doing ziplining here this year. I think they do that most years. I don't. That didn't sound too exciting to me, but I've ziplined before. It's I don't want to say zipline and jump the shark, but and I'll probably do it again at some point. But yeah, there's all sorts of stuff to do at the Mothman Festival. I edited this video down. I probably taped a few hours now that I think about it. I edited this down quite a bit, mostly because of the audio, and I didn't want to bore you. But I wanted to give you a rough idea of what you get if you go to the Mothman Festival and do their little van tour out to the igloos. And I've wanted to put something up more about Mothman, so I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you don't mind my crazy edits. But yeah, this was Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, 2014.